Into an old apartment complex near my university was a mix of excitement and practicality. The rent was cheap, and the proximity to campus made it a perfect fit for my student lifestyle. It was a humble abode, with outdated decor and the occasional creaky floorboard. But it was mine, and that's all that mattered. Living alone in the apartment had its perks. I could come and go as I pleased, study late into the night without disturbing anyone, and enjoy the solitude after a long day of classes. But as time passed, I began to notice strange occurrences that unsettled me. At first, it was just the odd discovery of random blonde hairs scattered throughout my apartment. I assumed they must have clung to my clothes or belongings after spending time outside. But as the sightings became more frequent, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss. Then came the night when I heard a voice. A soft, disembodied whisper calling my name from the darkness. Frozen in fear, I searched every corner of my apartment, but found nothing. It was as if the voice had vanished into thin air, leaving me shaken and unnerved. Reluctant to share my experiences with anyone, I kept the strange occurrences to myself, until one day, while chatting with my friends, I finally opened up about what had been happening. One friend, intrigued by the paranormal, suggested we conduct a seance to communicate with whatever might be haunting the apartment. We gathered in my living room, candles flickering and hearts pounding, as we attempted to make contact with the other side. But as the minutes ticked by and the room remained eerily silent, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were playing with forces beyond our control. The seance yielded no results, but the atmosphere in the apartment had changed. An undercurrent of unease lingered in the air, casting a shadow over our once light-hearted gathering. And when one friend had a terrifying nightmare later that night, I knew things had taken a dark turn. Shaken by my friend's experience and desperate for answers, I confided in my neighbor, a kind-hearted elderly woman who had recently moved in next door. I hoped she might have some insight into the strange occurrences plaguing my apartment. To my surprise, my neighbor's response only added to my growing sense of unease. She spoke of hearing crying coming from my apartment when she knew I was home alone, and of seeing a girl with blonde hair leaving my apartment on multiple occasions. But what chilled me to the bone was my neighbor's insistence that the crying had continued even after she confronted the girl, who claimed to be my roommate. But here's the thing. I didn't have a roommate. Not now. Not ever. As my neighbor's words sank in, a cold realization washed over me. There was something deeply wrong with my apartment, something sinister lurking in the shadows that I couldn't explain away with logic or reason. Now, with the mystery deepening and the safety of my home called into question, I'm left grappling with the unsettling truth that something malevolent may be at play, and that I may be its unwitting victim. Living alone in my apartment was starting to take its toll on my bank account. So when the opportunity arose to get a roommate, I jumped at the chance. Little did I know, I was about to invite something much more sinister into my home. At first, I didn't think much of it when he moved in. After all, his half of the rent was always paid on time, and that's all that mattered. But as the days turned into weeks, and then months, it started to bother me how little I knew about the person I was sharing my space with. From the moment he arrived, there was something off about him. He was always polite, but distant, disappearing into his room without a word and barely acknowledging my presence. I chalked it up to shyness at first, but as time went on, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to it. He'd send me text messages saying he'd be home late, but I never actually saw him. His room was always locked, and whenever I knocked, there was no answer. It was like he was a ghost haunting the apartment without actually being there. As the weeks passed, my curiosity turned to suspicion. What was he hiding in that room? And why was he so secretive about his comings and goings? I tried to brush off my unease, but it gnawed at me like a persistent itch, growing stronger with each passing day. One evening, in a rare moment of camaraderie, I suggested we go out for a drink and maybe grab some dinner together. He politely declined, citing work commitments and a need to rest. I shrugged it off at the time, but looking back, it seemed odd, almost like he was deliberately avoiding spending time with me. The next morning, I decided to make another attempt at bonding with my roommate. I knocked on his door, hoping to invite him out for breakfast or coffee, but there was no answer. Frowning, I sent him a text, asking if he wanted to hang out. His response was swift and surprisingly curt. "Not interested. Leave me alone." It was clear he had no interest in being buddies, and I couldn't help but feel a twinge of disappointment mixed with unease. The next evening, after a particularly heated argument on the phone with someone else, he stormed out of the apartment, leaving his room unlocked in his haste. I couldn't resist the temptation to snoop around, to finally uncover the secrets he had been hiding. With trembling hands, I pushed open the door and stepped inside, my heart pounding in my chest as I scanned the room for any sign of foul play. And then I saw it, a small metal box hidden away in the back of the closet, just like I had suspected. With a sinking feeling in the pit of my stomach, I opened the box and peered inside, my breath catching in my throat at what I found. It was filled with newspaper clippings, photographs, and other memorabilia. But these were no ordinary mementos. The clippings were all about missing persons, young men and women who had disappeared without a trace. And the photographs, they were of the same people, but their faces were pale, their eyes wide open and lifeless, like dolls in a macabre display. My mind raced as I tried to make sense of what I was seeing. Was my roommate responsible for these disappearances? And if so, what was he doing living in my apartment? A cold dread settled over me as the pieces of the puzzle clicked into place. My roommate wasn't just a recluse. He was hiding something much darker, something that made my blood run cold. I knew I had to get out of there fast. Packing my bags, I fled the apartment and sought refuge with my girlfriend, all the while feeling like I was being watched, like he was lurking in the shadows, waiting to strike. When I finally mustered the courage to call the authorities, I thought they'd swoop in and apprehend him, bringing an end to the nightmare. But as they combed through the apartment and checked their records, they delivered a chilling revelation. The name he'd given me didn't exist, and there was no trace of him ever having lived there. As I reflect on the ordeal, I can't help but feel a shiver run down my spine. I narrowly escaped becoming another victim of his twisted games, and I count myself lucky to be alive. But the experience serves as a stark reminder. Be wary of